in local news, the federal government has blamed state governors for being partly responsible for the rising rate of poverty nationwide. The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Clement Agba, says state chief executives prioritize the construction of heavy pieces of infrastructure, such as bridges and airports in cities, rather than improving the lives of the rural poor. Agba says despite the federal government's intervention to alleviate poverty, the results do not reflect the amount of investment made in the area.
Government is putting out, at the federal level, putting out so much money, but we are not seeing a reflection, so much reflection in terms of money that is being put out in alleviating poverty, which is one of the reasons the government also put in place the National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy. But if the government, federal government, puts the entire income that it earns into all of this without some form of complementarity from the state governments in playing their part, it will seem as if we are throwing money in a pond. Because the governors basically are only functioning in their state capitals. And democracy that we preach about is delivering the greatest good to the greatest number of people. And from our demography, it shows that the greatest number of our people live in the rural areas.
Okay, we are now being joined for further introspection on this by development expert Ayobami Oyalowo. Great to have you and welcome to Newsday. Now, I'd like to start with the response from the Commissioner of Information and Strategy for Akwa Ibom State, Mr. Obong, who says in his response, he says what determines poverty and unemployment in a country is economic policies. Economic policies are set nationally, so the federal government cannot abdicate its responsibility. Now, as a development expert, I would love to know your input. Who does the burden fall on? Is it state governments or is it federal government when it comes to creating projects and implementing projects that uplift Nigerians from poverty?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Nigerians. I will want to look at it from this as perspective. We understand that every Nigerian lives in a state and in a local government. The federal government can only implement or, not even necessarily implement. Most times they can formulate policies. But you see, our governors have been getting away with murder in the last several years, especially during this democracy, because it's easy for everybody to blame Abuja and whatever is going on in Abuja, but we actually maybe I may not 100% say the minister for Clement Agba was completely correct, but he's very right to a large extent. We have 70% of Nigerians live in rural areas. And if we have more people in rural areas, that means their welfare and their development mostly lies in the hands of the state government and the local government, and they have not been doing very well in that area. For instance, you find out that clearly most governors don't even visit some areas in their state until there's a need for them to go and campaign for another term or for something. So they don't really bother about what goes on in rural areas and other parts of the state. Most governors sit in the federal capital, and they develop the federal capital. I mean, I say federal capital, the state capital. They develop their state capitals. They build roads and bridges. But clearly, there are a lot of things missing. You find out that 90% of our food or whatever we eat comes from the states and from the rural area, I mean. And if 90% of it come from rural area and we have 70% of them living there, that means infrastructure should actually be diversified towards the places where the food comes in from. So that's why you realize that during harvest, we have cheap food that will even get to be thrown away. Then after 3 or 4 months, food prices shoots up again. So the state government have clearly not been able to develop system to ensure that the rural areas and the farmers, whatever they produce, is able to last over a year, and then you don't have this high prices during scarcity and low prices during harvest. So we need the state government that is supposedly closer to the people to also work to project the lives of our people, move them away from poverty. And you must understand that state governments have been very, very comfortable doing nothing. Most states don't do anything, because if you look at the development index today, Sokoto State is the poorest state in Nigeria, followed by Bayelsa that has only 8 local government, only 8. Meanwhile, Bayelsa takes, I think, the highest or the second highest from the federal allocation, whatever is given every month. They also collect 13% derivation, yet it is the second poorest state in Nigeria in terms of poverty index. So you see, the state government are not being honest with our people. They are not touching their lives. You must formulate system that you will identify what category of people needs a category of developmental process to bring them away from poverty. And I'll give you an example. The Lagos State government have the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. What they have been doing over the years is to train young people, because somebody just wakes up and go to the university to go and study history or religious knowledge, and is out of university and is complaining that he doesn't have a job. Clearly, what kind of a job does somebody with that kind of certificate get? Most likely he's not going to get anything if he's not a teacher. So the state decided that, okay, let's train these guys in entrepreneurial system, and they have been able to, over the, it's about 8-9 years now that program has been going on, and I know a lot of them have been trained in entrepreneurial skills, and they've been given funds to start up and build businesses, because everyone will not necessarily get a job in a bank or in the federal civil service or state civil service. People must be entrepreneurs. So, and these are things that federal government cannot do. It is a state that will do it. And look at the young people. I also remember a state called Gombe. Gombe had this huge number of young people. I don't know what they call them. It's done something. They are like area boys in quotes in Gombe. So what the former governor and this current governor has taken over it is these young people have been brought into the system. They were trained in different skills so that they can be useful to themselves and to the society. So state has more than 90% to do in terms of alleviating poverty, developing the populace, and ensuring that their lives are elevated. The job of the federal government is just to create what you would call an enabling environment. So clearly, our state government should not be looking for how to respond to the federal government by sending their commissioner for information. They should rather respond by trying to touch the lives of the people by creating systems that will work and develop our people and take them away from poverty. Extreme poverty.
Well, thank you, Mr. Oyalowo. You saying the state governments are supposed to, perform for 90% of the time. But would you really say that if we're going by the figures that you're putting it at, would you really say that the federal government has performed in that crucial 10% and that they've actually created that enabling environment for this to happen? Because at the end of the day, the main drivers of what we're seeing when it comes to, the food situation is insecurity, poverty, and lack of opportunity. And it's not, we also know that insecurity has also been prevalent in those areas where farmers have not been able to carry on, business as usual because of high insecurity. So is the federal government really in a place to point fingers when they've done so poorly on their part?
If you listen to me when I started, I said I would not 100% agree with Mr. Clement Agba. I laid that marker. The federal government has its own areas to fulfill, like you talked about insecurity. But I also think sometimes I think we get used to cliche and we keep saying it, insecurity. Yes, we have insecurity, no doubt about it. But if we have also been looking at it, the high prevalence and incidence of insecurity is more in speech than in reality these days. The military has done so well, but we keep talking about insecurity. We've not been having all this mass abduction like we used to have. Even the Kaduna Road, one of my friends, I was actually talking to him while coming here, just went to Kaduna yesterday, and he went by road. People are actually traveling. What most of them just do is now you don't travel maybe in the night so that you don't get so that you may not be kidnapped. But it is not as if it is that bad like it used to be, and we just like to drop this cliche. But clearly, I must also tell you that whatever the federal government is doing, if the states are not complementing, I'll give you an example also. In terms of the social investment program that this Buhari government started, so many states were either uncooperative or they decide to actually abuse the process completely. So even if the federal government designed system, it must be states that will implement it. So we must clearly get this, because I know that when they started this youth employment scheme they call Empower, federal government cannot monitor it fully. They had to depend on the state apparatus to help push this program. But we saw people just collect the 30,000 every month, and some of them don't even go to work, because what the state did was they just look for some of their political boys and girls that needed empowerment, and they just put their names there. So they just collect money every month and they don't do nothing. So you see, whether you like it or not, if the state is not cooperating and doing its own aspect, no matter the policy formed from the center, it will not work the way it is designed to work. So the state should not be looking for excuses, and we should not be helping them with all these excuses of, insecurity. I'm not taking away the fact that some areas have been largely exposed to insecurity. You won't take that away. But it's not as if everywhere is insecure. For areas where people need to take the young people away from the street, let the state do their job. For areas where you need to create good roads, access road to the rural area, so that food items can move easily. If you travel on our road, you will see what I'm talking about. You will see trucks laden with all manner of farm produce broken down on the road due to bad road, and this food item might just rot away because they won't get fixed. The truck may not get fixed for a while. So the state and the local government must do what you call their own aspect, which is actually the critical aspect. No matter what the federal government do, it's going to be just in terms of policy or designing of programs. But who will implement it? It is still the states and the local government. So we should not exonerate them from doing their job. Honestly, I'm very angry at so many states because clearly they don't do their job. They are so satisfied pointing fingers at Abuja so that the people keep fighting and getting angry at Abuja, and the state government continue to get away with murder. How many times have our state governors left office and then you see FCC mentioning very humongous amount that has been mismanaged, either in security fund, either in ecological fund, or whatever fund it is. So even some of this ecological fund, and even there are some educational fund that state government needed to pay their counterpart funding so that the fund will be accessible. What do these states do? They refuse to pay, just so that they don't do what they needed to do. So we must tell our governors to allow local government to work, because for instance, where I come from, my local government, most of our roads were built by local government chairmen who were allowed to function. But the moment we had this new system where governors appropriate everything to local government chairmen, to themselves, and give local government chairmen very small funds. I went back home recently when I was campaigning before to be as an aspirant, and unfortunately what I saw was really saddening, because most of the roads that were built by old local government chairmen today are in tatters, and the current local government chairmen are completely irrelevant because they are at the mercy of the governor. The governor, on the other hand, appropriate all the monies to themselves and ensure that nothing is done at the local government level. So we need to let our governors know that they are a major problem and they need to do their job so that Nigerians will feel the impact of governance in their life. Federal government must do its own part. They must secure us. They must formulate policies. They must put in what you call an environment that is enabling, that's an enabling environment. But beyond that, the state government must be the one to implement and touch the lives of the people, because they are the closest people to the people. They are the closest authority to the people. And without their own impact, the federal government will just be making noise in Abuja. The state will do nothing if the government the governors are not doing their part.
Okay, Mr. Oyalowo, let's take a look at the role of true federalism, which many can argue is yet to happen in Nigeria, where most states don't have the autonomy to embark on these projects. For example, if we're looking at some of the major expressways that you're talking about that would transport goods from farms to cities and so forth, they're not within the jurisdiction of state governments. They're a responsibility of the federal government. And a lot of them end up idle, especially if the government in that state is not in union with the government of the day in the federal government. And apart from that, other issues that you take away the autonomy of the federalism of the state. You look at inflation, for example. Let's look at corruption at all levels, not just on state level, at a national level as well. Let's look at population growth. Let's look at economic policies. Let's look at the fuel subsidy. Let's look at the things that are controlled by the federal government. Now, is it really fair for us to say that all of these factors are, as you said, not 100%, but what's a pass mark? More than 50%? Do we give the federal government a pass mark on all of these things and say that the blame now needs to be...
You see, no, it's not about blaming. For me, I don't see it as a blame game. I see it as a call to action on every part. For instance, you mentioned some very key items. You talked about population growth, for instance. Now, if a federal government had said people should not have more than 4 children, but federal government cannot implement these things, because if the state governors tell you that, oh, our religion or our culture says it is not like that, nothing anybody can do. So clearly our population is a challenge that we have not looked into, and I say this everywhere I get to, because of the peculiarity of religion, culture, and some other things. People don't want to say what they need to say. But the examples abound. In 1960, when Britain was our colonial master, we were 40 million. Britain was about 50 million. Today, Britain is about 68, 69 million. We are 200 and something million in terms of statistics. So the population has blown up beyond reasonable, manageable level. So these are challenges that we need to factor in. And like I said, I don't want to actually look at it like we must blame this or blame that, but everybody needs to work. And then in terms of state and federal government also, you must also understand that with the Land Act, the state government own all the land. So the federal government cannot even come and, let's say for instance, farm in a state. So state government needs to encourage farming and put whatever measure they need to put in place. Maybe they want to give incentive also. So federal government will coordinate. And yes, in terms of fuel subsidy and all these things, that is another big issue that I don't think we want to open the can here, because clearly we are struggling as a country. From every indication, a liter of fuel in Nigeria, that's a petrol, the one we're all used to, should go between 300 to 350 naira per liter. But the federal government is subsidizing it. And that subsidy is creating so much problem in terms of financing, federal government financing. They are not having enough money to do other things. And if you remove that subsidy today and fuel becomes 350 naira, there will be challenge. But already all over I was coming now, all petrol stations in Abuja are either not selling, and the few that are selling, the queue is as long as whatever you want to think about. So that's another big problem that it needs a better coordination, not this argument of the state is wrong, the federal government is right, or the federal government is wrong, the state is right. We must sit down as a country and agree on ourselves, by ourselves. Do we really want to continue to do this fuel subsidy thing? Is it sustainable? I don't think so. But do you want to remove it? If you are removing it, what are the things you are putting in place to ensure people don't suffer hardship, because things are already hard as it were? So those are challenges that we must look at on both sides. So I don't want to delve into that area, because the time I'm sure you are giving me will not even allow us to start that area.
But we do appreciate your time, Mr. Ayobami Oyalowo. Thank you for your opinion, and thank you for joining us on Newsday.